Welcome to another episode of the Highlands podcast. We have a special one. This is our last episode of the season, and I've got our youth pastors with us. We're so excited to have Jackie and Preston with us. And so make sure if you have a teenager in your house, or if you coach, teach, if you have grandkids who are teenagers, this episode is for you. And they're going to be giving us some incredible insights into teenagers, which for most adults is a very scary, scary people. And so, Preston and Jackie, you guys actually, in full disclosure, at the time of this recording, are not yet married, but at the time of the release, you will be married. So congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
And so, Preston, tell us about all of the accomplishments you've done for the wedding. Like, I know you planned it all out.
Oh, man. Well,
He's done nothing. Jackie, tell us about the wedding. Like, you ready for it?
Oh, we're almost ready.
Yeah.
We're as ready as we can be.
Okay.
It's 7 days from today.
Right.
So we still have a couple final details to hammer out, but we're excited.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
definitely.
Yeah, he's following along. So, Preston, tell us about yourself, about even, we're going to talk about youth ministry, but just even a call to be a pastor and kind of what that looked like.
Yeah, so, well, I've been born and raised in this church. I had the opportunity to be in youth with you, terrorizing your youth group.
By the way. So.
And then I actually felt the call to be a pastor from pretty young age. I was actually at kids camp then. I thought God was telling me he's going to make me electric guitarist for the church.
Okay.
God later developed that into the pastoral ministry, and just through it, seeking God and trying to really hammer out what are you really calling me to? What is my purpose and what have you said about me? Yeah. And just kind of really going on a journey through life and through ups and downs and just different seasons of brokenness and fullness.
Right.
And just following Jesus in that as I go through. Yeah.
I love that because we just, on our last episode, talked with our kids pastors, Liz and Jean, about the importance of camp. And, you felt, so you're stepping into, in your early 20s, a call that God put on your life when you were a kid at kids camp. That's amazing. And that's again, we'll talk about camp, the importance of that later on, but that's an awesome story. And yes, that's how old I am, that you were in my youth group and now you're my youth pastor. I don't know if that's a good or bad decision on my part. Parents, you could decide at the end of this episode, but Jackie, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I am also in my early 20s. Are we asking about my calling?
Yeah, or just a little bit about that call.
Yeah. So right now I serve as the middle school pastor.
Yeah.
Middle schoolers are crazy, but my story's a little different. I didn't grow up at this church. I grew up at a non-denominational church. We were there for 20 years, and my family loved being at that church.
Sure.
I actually remember being like 5 to 10 years old. I was really young, sitting in the main sanctuary, and the thought came into my mind, I want to be a pastor. I want to be up there. I want to preach. And I never really told anyone. I just thought that would be so cool to do that. Yeah. And so I went along, and my youth pastors gave me a couple opportunities to preach, and I was always felt it on my heart. I want to preach. I want to lead. And leadership was just such a huge thing that I was drawn to. Actually, when I was a fifth grader, I ran to be student body president. So I gave a speech in front of 500 kids, and I handed out little buttons. But I just remember the principal coming in and saying, we're going to do this. And I was I need to do that. And so, my family knew, I was called to something, but in our specific church, we didn't have any female pastors, and so I couldn't really put my finger on it. It didn't really make sense ever to me until when I was 18 years old. I was trying to figure out my senior year, what am I going to do? I went to Hillsong International Leadership College for 1 year.
In Australia?
Okay. My parents actually sent me on a plane by myself 2 weeks after graduating high school.
Wow.
And that was a big deal. I don't know why they let me go by myself. I don't think you can imagine putting Avery on a plane you would want to drop her off. And my parents were let's drop you off. I was no, I'm going. And that church is, Hillsong's a Pentecostal church, and they have female pastors. So I received my pastoral calling there. And the first service I sat in, there was a woman, middle-aged, speaking, and I was like, what's happening? Like, I've never seen a woman behind the pulpit.
I'm more concerned about middle age, because you're in their 20s. Like, I'm middle age, I think, to you guys, which is concerning to me. But anyway.
Yeah.
I hear that it's like trigger words for me right now.
Right.
I'm just like, I'm already feeling old because this guy was in the youth group. So anyway. All right. So middle age.
Yeah. And I was
I'm assuming my age, so probably in her 40s, speaking at Hillsong.
I think, okay, maybe a little older than you. I was just so shocked. I was like, what is happening? I never in my life seen that.
You've never seen a female pastor speak before?
Never.
Wow.
Yeah.
There was actually another man that came up and introduced her.
Yeah.
They have like a huge thing about honor there. And so he got up, and he was probably your age, so a little younger.
Okay.
And he's like, just like honoring her and saying like, she's going to get up here. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I was just so shocked. And so I dove into what the Bible says and doctrine. And I was able to receive a calling, a very, very specific calling to pastoral ministry that year. And so I found the Highlands a couple years ago. And as far as I knew, it's the only place that has female pastors in the valley. And so that was even kind of a shock for me, too.
So then you moved back from Australia during the pandemic, right?
It was, so I was there for a year.
Were you there before?
It was like 2018 that I came back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it was before that.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And then you guys met?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't. This podcast is not for that romance story. Like, we'll talk, maybe do another podcast later. But so then you guys, for the last 8-9 months or so, as of this recording, have been leading high school and then middle school, right?
Yeah,
and you've been serving together. So tell us how it's worked with you guys serving together.
So originally I was hired part-time as the middle school pastor, and me and Jackie were actually co-teaming it up, and we were leading, and so it actually was great. It flowed really well. We both had our other full-time jobs, and we were, I would take the boys for small groups and the messages and stuff, and she'd take the girls and we kind of like partnered it, and then we'd trade off speaking and just leading, and the middle school ministry exploded. And then even now, and then our pastor David, he felt called elsewhere, and so then I was hired full-time, and Jackie was hired full-time for middle school, and now middle school is exploding again, and the youth has just been growing tremendously, and we've just been really just working to each other's strengths. I'm not organized. I'm very charismatic, and I love people. Jackie's extremely organized and very passionate, and like we just kind of like are learning to work through with our strengths and teaming up with the youth.
That's good. So why youth ministry? Like, why is that so meaningful to both of you?
Me first?
Well, let's start with Jackie. He's been talking too much.
Move over to the extrovert in him. I think for me, like youth ministry, like that made my faith real. Like I remember the moment I accepted Jesus as a kid, and I understood, like I asked my mom, like, can we pray the prayer, I want to accept Jesus? And that was like, I knew what I was getting into. I got baptized as a kid, but youth ministry was like where I like, I had mentors. Like I had a best friend who was an atheist, and so she would like literally debate me on all like the existence of God and like science and everything. And so at a young age, I'm like working out my faith and all these hard questions, and I would go back and like tell her. But I had mentors in my life, and I just remember like youth was like, that was the place I wanted to be. And like I would be at school all day. He was homeschooled. I was not homeschooled.
Already putting you on you're on blast. Wow.
It's just a different lifestyle.
We were even talking about homeschooling. Like, you had to work that in there somehow.
It's a different lifestyle. Like, you're tired, you're in sports, you're like running around, like never at home. But I wanted to be at church. Like that's the place like I would go, and I felt like I could just like breathe and relax and connect with God. And it was so much fun too. Like we would go to camps every year. My first camp, I got stuck in a dryer. So we were playing hide and seek in it was like on a college campus. We were in a dorm, and I was like, I'll go in the dryer. And this girl from another church, she put money in the dryer to start it while I was inside the dryer.
Oh my.
So it was crazy. Like, but it was so fun. And like, I remember when I graduated high school, one of my mentors, my small group leader, she was there with me at the camp. And she posted, she's like, from the 6th grader that got stuck in the dryer to like who you are now. But It was just awesome. It was
Camp
a place,
games are no joke, though.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll like bleed for them and like all kinds of things. So
it gets pretty competitive.
I would have stuck a kid in the dryer too if I had thought about it. If that would have won a game.
You would have started it on Preston.
For sure.
Oh man, yeah.
I should have stuck you in the dryer.
You probably should have.
Youth ministry, meaningful to you? Why? What has it been?
Yeah, youth ministry is really where it started for me. As you know, a little bit of ups and downs for me in youth. Maybe not super troublesome.
Is that how we're calling them?
Yeah,
little bits of ups and downs. We're not going to talk about how you were being a punk kid like in the youth group.
I've made a big change.
Jesus is real.
Yeah, Jesus is real. It's evident. If anybody's evident of that, that's me. That's where you're, like Jackie said, that's where your faith really, for me at least, it became real. And I think everybody, when you're born into a Christian home, or maybe your family is a young family is introduced into Christianity and to Jesus early, and they accept, and then the kids are like all on board because they're extremely trusting. That's one of the beautiful things. Right. But at a certain point, I think students, like especially in the high school, middle school age, they have to start making it their own. Right. They make their faith their own and actually get connected to the church on their own. Yeah. We see a lot of students or a lot of high school, middle school age kids. They go into college and then they step away from the faith, and it's because they never really owned their Christianity. They were just carrying what their parents believed, which was great when they were a kid. Right. But when they start becoming in college age and all that, they need to really understand what they believe and why, and why Jesus, because Jesus moves in our life, and just knowing Jesus transformed my life, and he saved me, even being born and raised in a Christian home and coming to church, like just seeing Jesus impact my life, and then seeing like a middle schooler, high schooler just being baptized in the Holy Spirit and their life changing, and like it's just dramatic. And it's such a dramatic shift where Jesus, he's still moving, he's redeeming, and I want to be all a part of that process.
Awesome. I think both of you, though, I think the key as you're talking about it is that you are helping create some safe spaces to like work out. And I was thinking about it. I had a great youth pastor, but he didn't make the most impact on me. Like it was actually a 10th grade Sunday school teacher, and he took us through a book. He invited us to his house every Sunday. We watched football, and at halftime we would go through a chapter. And that still is, I mean, again, that was a long time ago, but that still has been meaningful to me, even to now. And it sounds like from you, you had, and I know actually some of the youth leaders that you had at your church growing up, and it's really good people, like who love Jesus and who love students, and you were here, and you know
you loved me. I think.
Well, I tried. I think you were in 8th grade when I first came, and I was dating your aunt.
Yes,
Amy at the time, and you, if I'm right, and there's cameras, so don't lie. You were not excited about me coming to be youth pastor.
Man, right? I was the one starting the boycotting.
I was taking your aunt away, dating her.
Yeah, that was my best friend.
Yeah, she was living with your family at the time, and then you had loved the previous youth pastor, and I come in and I'm taking everything away from you. And you hated me.
Just a big wrecking ball.
So you spent the next 5 years trying to ruin things.
Yeah. But you know what? I'll give it to you that you stuck with it with me. You took me serious in small groups and when I was there.
When you were there.
You made a big impact on me. So.
Well, so let's talk. I know you guys don't have kids yourself, but you guys are working with teenagers week in, week out. And in a lot of respects, parents, I was youth pastor for a while before I had kids, and a lot of parents will see you to as experts because you deal with some of the scariest people on earth, teenagers. And so again, I think that whether it's Wednesdays, Sundays, camps, like game nights, all these different things you're seeing. So let's talk, we're gonna talk about spiritual tips in a moment. So let's go practical. What are some practical tips? Because I talk with parents, and I parent 2 teenagers myself. And so sometimes, when they're little, like they're like, Dad is the most amazing. And then when they get older, they're just like, Dad, what are you talking about? And
you're weird.
Your jokes aren't funny. I had to get out of youth ministry because of my daughters were growing up, and they were like, Dad, you're not cool anymore. I'm like, I thought I was. And so, but a lot of parents, maybe, I don't know if struggle is the right word, but they just are figuring out how to like parent and even connect in with their teenagers. Yeah. So can you give us a couple of practical tips?
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
We're going to go start with Jackie.
Jackie. Ladies first.
Can you just come with us everywhere? Because
I know, yeah. I could be the referee right here. He was like this, by the way, in youth group. So he always.
Oh, I'm sure.
Always.
I love to talk to him.
Constant motor mouth.
So tips for parents connecting with their teens.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this beforehand a little bit. I think 2 things that parents can be sometimes that actually push their kids away. Like teenagers don't usually want to talk to their parents or be around them.
Right.
So it's so hard. But I think like when a parent is dominant, that pushes their kids away.
Okay.
And also like, you know, if they're aggressive or just like, you know, hyper scary.
Yeah.
But also if they're just dismissive.
Okay.
You know, like with their teenagers. And everyone's different personalities. But something his mom always points out about me is she's like, you treat the teenagers like they're people. And I'm like, they are people, you know, to me. And I think they're like fun. And a lot of these teenagers are like, I look at them as my younger siblings that I never had because I'm the youngest. And so when they're like talking to me, I'm just like, wow, like, you know, and like we just had a Bible study with some middle school girls on Wednesday and they're sitting around the table. And so the Bible study started at 4.
Okay. And
we had to get back to church by like 5:30.
Okay.
And it's like 5:15 and I'm like, okay, let's start the Bible study. Because they were just like, they all have these stories and they're just going around sharing, okay, this is my story I have for you. This is my story I have for you. And they say, I'm like, do you save up your stories for me? They're like, yeah. And so then one of the girls goes, you have to let us yap. Like, we're not just here for Bible study. Like, we want to talk. And I'm just like, I know. Like, I know we're not just here like just to read the Bible. And I'm like, but it's 5:15. It's been going for like an hour and 15 minutes.
That's funny.
But I think like, you know, they just want like, they want to be taken seriously. Like, whatever's going on in their world is so real to them. Like, it's so real. Even if it's like, you know, like heartbreak or whatever that like seems silly. Like we went through a relationship series and I was sharing funny stories about my first 6th grade boyfriend. And I'm laughing, but I remember like the emotions were like so real. And so I think like sometimes like parents can just kind of, you know, just like, and they're not really paying attention. But I think just creating a safe space is really important.
I think it's important because I do think parents can dismiss because they're dealing with mortgage, they're dealing with problems at work, and then their kid comes home and they're struggling with a grade or whatever. And so parents are like, well, that's not important. They actually did studies where a high school breakup is similar in stress and trauma as a divorce. And some of it's just because of the emotional maturity of different ages, but it's very real of what these kids, and I say kids, but these teenagers are dealing with because it matters to them. And you're right. I love that of parents of when your kid is like struggling with what it could be the smallest thing, but it's big to them. So I love that. What's your practical tips for parents?
Practical tips for parents. I would say honestly, affirming their identity. I think our teenagers, there's a big identity crisis. I mean, like honestly, that's 9 times out of 10 when I'm talking to a student, either the student has created some false identity of themselves and that ends up being really destructive for them later, or they don't even know who they are and they're constantly trying to fill it with all sorts of just different things, whether that's addictions, whether that's like people, friends, like whatever it is. So as parents, I think that would be my biggest tip is just non-spiritual. Just affirm who they are, their identity, that they are valuable, that they do have worth. Because right now I think we're fighting a real big battle with like social media, especially with it being on the rise. It's just a massive comparison game where you can look at anybody around the world as they are giving you this fake image of themselves and saying, hey, I've got it all together. And then they look at their own life and they're comparing right off the bat. And that goes for the same for the guys and the girls. I think sometimes we feel like girls are more prone to comparison and stuff like that. But really, I'm seeing it both with the guys and the girls. And like, hey, I have to have it all together. I have to make all this money. I have to have all this success or whatever you have. I think parents just, whatever you do, just affirm who they are, and be a louder voice in that social media.
That's good.
and then also just like affirming them and both like, hey, I'm proud of you, like I love you and I care about you. And I remember even me going through high school, like that's like some of those like moments where I heard my dad or my mom say, hey, I love you and I'm proud of you. Those were really like strong moments for me that really like,
and for who you are, not necessarily what you did.
Exactly. Just like I love you because you're my son, I think is exactly like just be like because of like who you are as a person, not because of what you did. I think that would be my biggest tip.
I love those. We were talking with the kids pastors on our last episode of how it seems like in our culture that problems that adults used to deal with, teenagers deal with. And now it's even like younger. Like I've known kids who were 10 struggling with suicide. And I'm like, man, should 10-years-olds even know what the word suicide is? And it seems like all these problems are getting younger and younger and younger. And I want to go back because I want to qualify what you're saying. Because sometimes we'll have kids, teenagers say like, I am this identity or whatever. It's affirming the identity that Jesus has made them. I think that they go to school and they get maybe they go to public school, or they go to another environment, or even sports practices, and it's like, well, you're maybe you're not a boy, you're not a girl, you're this or that or whatever. And I think let's talk about that for a moment. And I wasn't planning on going there, but that's a big topic for parents today. So identity. Let's say that their daughter comes home and like they're not sure that they are feeling like they're a girl anymore. What would maybe be some like immediate and I know this is a much nuanced and deep conversation, but just practically to kind of get some things out there. What would you say to that parent who's like, my daughter doesn't think she's my daughter anymore. She thinks she's my son.
Yeah. Well, I actually know some parents that are going through this, and the first thing is like, hey, I'm sorry. I know this is like this is it's heavy,
shocking.
And I would say the first thing is to say like, hey, God did not make any mistakes. Like He created you. He fearfully and wonderfully made you. And He knew you before you were even born, and like before creation, He knew you. And really at the core of it, what it comes down to is just they feel different to maybe the normal roles of gender or whatever that have. But I would say the biggest thing is just saying, hey, God doesn't make mistakes. He made you the way you are on purpose. Like, now we might have some brokenness that obviously He didn't intend for us, but just really just affirming that like there's nothing wrong with who God made them to be.
I think we read it's in John where Jesus says like the devil comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And I think a lot of what He's doing in our particular youth is creating like confusion.
Oh man.
Like it's so much confusion where if you can get a kid to think that maybe because the identity is so important of like that's who God made them to be. But then if the devil can like get them to be confused about that, then he can shape everything about the future. What would you tell parents who are struggling with that? With their kid came home and they're like, I don't know if I'm this gender anymore. Yeah,
I think that something you have to look at it like through different kind of like levels of seriousness. Like if I think of it psychologically as well, like is there something that happened in their life that made them feel that way? Is there some trauma that they need to work through? Like, what's the reason? And if it's not something like deep that they really need to like work through, then like, is it the influence of society? Are their friends maybe like having these similar identity crises? And I think something to think about is just like, just lost my train of thought, but just like the influence that like people have. Like I remember being young and like I went to the eye doctor and I lied about my vision test because I thought that glasses were cool. I literally lied. And even knowing that if you wear glasses and you're not supposed to, it'll mess up your eyes. And so just like remembering, like, I don't know if it was my favorite like person on TV wore glasses, and I was like, oh, they're so pretty or they're so cool, like, and that influenced me to make me want to like copy them. Like we saw even just in the TV show 13 Reasons Why, suicide became something that people were like having ideation because of the attention that a person would get. But it's like, just like you said, if the enemy steals your life and kills you and destroys you because of these suicidal thoughts, like what do you have left? Like the attention wasn't worth it. And so I think like you got to meet them where they're at and ask those questions, like why are you feeling like this? But also, of course, affirm what the Bible says and remember the verse that says, take every thought to be obedient to Christ, to be obedient to the truth. Yeah. It's the same with if you're having anxious thoughts, you have to force those thoughts to obey Christ and obey to the truth. And so,
I remember I was a single dad, and Avery and Valerie were young, and I've never parented a son. And I remember, because I was thinking about what you're saying with parents, sometimes even unknowingly, we can even reject our kids. So I remember when they were little and I was trying to get them to Spider-Man, sports, all the things. Because I thought that if I can get them to that, then we would have more to connect over. And so when they were little, they were like princesses. They wanted to watch all the princess shows and all the princess movies and dress up princesses. And for a little while, and this is a smaller scale than maybe some of the things we were talking about, but I think it's some seeds later. I was trying to for a while of Spider-Man, and they're princess. And finally I was like, okay, my girls don't like Spider-Man. They don't like sports. They don't like these things. So if I'm going to be the dad that I want to be to them, I have to start connecting with what they, and sometimes I think that kids get rejected by their parents because their dad wants them to do Spider-Man and maybe do boy things, but they're a female. And so they're like, but I like this stuff, but I want to please my dad. So I'm going to turn away. And then I think it leads to maybe some bigger gender questions later. And so it's one of those things I think parents can say, God has made and given me a beautiful daughter, beautiful son, whatever that, and I'm going to lean into that. And so maybe for moms, maybe moms don't know about baseball, but they can learn. Valerie, my youngest, she is in gymnastics, and she's been doing gymnastics for 11 years, and I still don't know some of her flips and tricks and stuff. She gets so annoyed with me. The other day, she was like, Dad, I've been doing this for 11 years. You still don't know what whatever it is. And I'm just so I feel like I'm failing sometimes, but I think if we can accept our kids of their likes, their dislikes, even some of the things that maybe they enjoy, they would feel more acceptance. And I think, like you were saying, it's just maybe a rejection from the world. Let's flip it. And we've been dealing with some spiritual things as well. But I think one of the hardest things parenting teenagers is connecting in with them, because now they're starting to become an independence. Yeah. They get their permit, then they get their license, they're thinking about college, they have friends now. They don't need a mom or a dad hovering over them all the time. And so there's starting to be, it's natural, but there's starting to be more of a pulling away. And it's not all bad. A lot of it's just good and it's God ordained. But how would you encourage parents who are, and we'll talk middle school in a moment, but let's talk high school, they're getting older, they're kind of starting to get more independence, thinking about a future apart from mom or dad. How would you encourage parents to not lose those last few years with their kids, but to really connect in with their high schoolers?
Yeah. Well, I would say spending time. I would say definitely, if you have that opportunity, that ability, have those dinners with them. Okay. I would say definitely pray with them and pray over them and bless their future. Have them even pray for your family. Okay. I would also say if you guys can and you guys have the opportunity, read the Bible together as a family. I think a family-centered relationship with Jesus is so powerful when a family really unites with Jesus and just comes and seeks Jesus together. That's good. Getting them connected in a church and teaching them how to get connected in a church, invaluable. Yeah. Because when they are out of your household and when they are in the world, they will know where to get rooted and where to get plugged in. Another thing that I've been telling a lot of our seniors right now as we're going into them graduating high school is, hey, if you go and you visit a college, do not leave that town without visiting a local church and getting names, getting plugged in. Yeah. Don't leave without getting plugged in and knowing where you're going, because the reality is you're going to be facing the world of all different kinds. Right. And it's very biblical to when in doubt, you go in the community of believers to be affirmed. You don't go in the people who are against what you believe and against Jesus and your faith, because then you're going to end up being lost. And so definitely just instilling those core values of, hey, our relationship with Jesus is the number one. It's the most valuable. That's good. And parents can lead the way by doing that.
Yeah, I think that's so good, because I think parents underestimate the spiritual effect that they have on their kids. it's kind of weird as I think back, but my dad, even through college, like still came into my room when I was there, and he would pray with me before he went to bed, because I would stay up late to do schoolwork or whatever. And that's still like meant, so we still do that with our girls of like, and you know, they're 16 and 14, but that's just like our habit. But I think it's good because sometimes high schoolers feel like on their own. And again, some of it's good, but some of it's also like, no, you're not. Like, you still, like, until you got bills coming in your name, you're not on your own. Like, you got to, you know, figure out some of those things. But let's talk middle school is a whole different, like, animal. Like, they really are. And parents of middle schoolers feel like, oh my gosh, what am I raising right now? So middle schoolers, you know, they're like, it's so awkward. Like, they're figuring out, like, you know, like, I mean, we talk about identity, but just even puberty, and they're boys and girls, and like voices are changing, and like everything is changing, and like they're getting like growing up taller, like it's nothing fits anymore because they're just growth spurts, all the stuff. So middle schoolers, help us with our middle schoolers.
Yeah, I know. And there's so many middle schoolers at our church right now. It's just like, man, like they used to scare me. Yeah. And now I just laugh with them because they're so crazy. Like, I always say there's this row of boys, and they'll be like punching each other in the knees. And I'm just like, at first I'm like, why are they so loud? Like, you know, like go sit in the back or whatever. Now I'm just like, I just regularly, every time I speak, just say shush into the microphone like 15 times. And that's just how it is. Like, you know, but I think in terms of something that parents can do that will really help their middle schoolers is to be aware of technology and the digital age. I mean, my parents used to turn our Wi-Fi router off at 9 o'clock at night. And my siblings and I were like, what the heck? Like, we want to stay up. We want to be on social media. We had all these, like, secret, like, Instagram accounts. And we had iPads. And so we're like, you know, like, this is our life. And they would turn it off. And my brother would sneak out of his room and turn it back on. And, you know, but I think, like, I was sitting with some of the middle school girls. And I'm like, just tell me what your screen time is. Just tell me. Like, I just want to know, you know? And I've had social media, to give context, since I was 11 years old. That's when Instagram was like released, I think. And so I've had social media forever. Actually took like a 2-year like break from it, which has changed my life and my walk with God. So that's why I'm saying this. But I think like our parents and like maybe even like your generation didn't experience like what my generation has experienced. And I also think, like, to take it another step, I don't know what it's like to live in a world where from birth, like, this has all been around. And so for me, it was like a little later. I'd already developed. And so we find that like a lot of use of technology is connected to emotional issues and behavioral issues, suicidal thoughts, comparison, low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, pornography use. Like, I just read someone said they deleted Instagram and that helped them overcome their struggle with pornography. And so I think it's like the connection is there. And I think if parents are aware of that, like maybe parents, like something practical, just ask your kids, what's your screen time?
That's good.
One of the girls, her screen time was like 8 hours, 8 hours a day. Another one, and some of these girls are in school all day too, and they're like 4 hours, 5 hours. My TikTok use alone is 3 hours. And so I told her, I was like, hey, maybe look at the app that's like the most and delete that one. Now our hearts they're like idol makers, so you'll replace that with something else. But if you can start to break some of those ties, there's this pastor, John Mark Comer. I love him. I love his content. He has this podcast. It's something that has to do with like the ruthless elimination of hurry. And so he's done it with Jefferson Bethsky or something. And so it's like a super short series. And that is like what got me aware of all of this. And so he says that the great enemy of spiritual life is hurry and just busyness and like, what better way to like just have your mind inundated and not even be able to think or pray or be silent or be still before the Lord. Like, that's so foreign to them. Because every spare second, like you're just like overloaded with content and information. And so I don't know, when TikTok was released, like it was during COVID. And it was insane how the app just like instantly you're exploded, just like you're sucked into it.
Yeah.
And I would be laying in my bed and I was already an adult and I would be laying in bed scrolling for like 3 hours and I'm just like my mind in the back of my mind some places like just close the app.
Yeah.
But the app is so addictive. Yeah. It's like you just keep going and you get distracted again and again. And so I think with middle schoolers, just be aware if it's video games for boys, it's usually video games a little more than anything else. Yeah. Just be aware like if they're becoming really withdrawn, and they like start dressing differently, things like that, like they might be struggling with like suicidal thoughts. We have to make so many calls like about students that are struggling with that and just be like horrible. Aware of like their behavioral changes and emotional changes and how that's all connected.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
I think too it's hard because you are, you know, we give devices to our kids probably too soon.
Yeah, probably.
But then it's also like we are giving them, if we don't put any sort of filters or restrictions on the phones, we're giving them like unfettered access to the worst of the world at their fingertips. Man. Like whether it's through, social media apps or even online. And so I don't know, I love what you're talking about with screen time and there's parent controls like on iPhone. I'm sure on Google as well of like, even like minimizing. Amy and I were talking to the girls the other day, and it was like Avery had mentioned something about like spam accounts, and we're like, okay, what is that? Like, tell us what that is, and like, because we hadn't heard that, and you know, I guess it's kids will have another account where maybe it's just for friends, or maybe more nefariously, it's to hide some things from others, and so it was just like even for parents to say like, okay, what does that mean? Like, what is that? Like, and it I think parents don't want to ask that because they don't want to feel like they're out of the know or they like are out of the loop, but we're fighting for our kids, like their souls. And so I think it's okay to say like, okay, what does that mean? And I think that's really good. So I love that. I want to focus and kind of spend the last few moments on camps. So at the time of this recording, we're a few months away from camps, but camps are so meaningful and so impactful. And so I want you to give us, we have every summer parents who are like, they didn't grow up in a Christian home or they didn't know what camps are. So they're like, what's camps? So give us your best, 30-second pitch of why camps are so important for teenagers.
Oh man, camp's incredible. It's like, it just gives us that opportunity to unplug from the world and just plug into Jesus. Okay. And I think that's the biggest thing is just being away from your phone. There's no phones allowed. Yeah. It's a great thing.
I know.
And it's just, with multiple services, you hear message. There's a lot of worship. It's pretty much a community of similar age Christian followers of Jesus, high school and middle schoolers who just are able to dive in and just truly like be comfortable, be safe, but then just really pursue God. Like, does Jesus really show up when I call to him? Does he really manifest himself here and in my life? And will he speak to me? And we see every year the baptism of the Holy Spirit. I mean, I've seen, and it's crazy because they go to camp, they get this crazy, incredible faith because they hear Jesus speak to them, and that an encounter with Jesus changes your life. And like, we'll see people, students, like even middle schoolers, lay hands on another student and say, in the name of Jesus, you're healed, and a broken bone was healed.
That's amazing.
And so like, it really is just, it's a transforming experience. Now, you don't need camp to have that encounter, but to build that environment and to give them that safe place, you really have to seek it out. I think camp is a great opportunity.
And I think that's the best thing about camp is no distractions. And you mentioned it about no phones.
Oh man,
I remember years ago we were at camp and it was when Pokemon Go was like really big, and we allowed the students to bring phones, and everyone was on their phone trying to catch whatever. I wasn't allowed to have Pokemon growing up because that was the house I grew up in. But I remember they're all like trying to catch these things, and we're looking around, me and a couple of leaders, and we're like, this is not what camp is about. Like, and so what's funny is like the very next year we were like, all right, we're not going to do any phones, and we actually had more grief from parents than teenagers. Like the parents were like, how dare you? How could you disconnect us from my kid? And the teenagers were like, thank you, because we needed this break from social media, from whatever. And Snapchat was a little bit bigger back then, so they had friends doing their snap streaks or whatever. I'm like, let it go. But I think that is so important of like, hey, we're not going to have any distractions right now. And I think, and you're right, that can happen at home. but it's harder to like remove all distractions at home than going out to camp. So what would be your best pitch to parents who are on the fence about either letting their little boy, their little girl go away, maybe for the first time, and then sending them off to camp?
Yeah, I think that I was thinking about camp, and I think just through personal experience, through seeing a lot of students, like I think I've been a camp counselor for church camps like 4 years.
Yeah.
And I think we see more growth in that like 5 days than we see in a whole calendar year sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible. Like students will be struggling with like bondage or, addictions, like drug addiction, addiction to vapes or whatever it is, like weed, I don't know. We see everything. Yeah. And they don't have that for that week. They start thinking about it. They start thinking about like, Jesus instead of everything else. Yeah. Like maybe their home is chaotic or maybe they're just normally in a rhythm. Yeah. They get sucked out of that rhythm. They can focus on Jesus, hear about him. They have the time to make a decision about their faith. They have opportunities to lay things down before the Lord, and a lot of them like just respond to that in incredible ways. And can I tell a quick story?
Yeah, of course.
There was a student, I think it was 2 years ago at high school camp. She came in like, drug addiction. She's like, I don't believe in God anymore. Yeah. Like there was like demonic influences in her life. And like all week we're just like praying. Like I had this conversation with her for like an hour during one of the huge like rec activities. They're doing a color fight, and that's the other half of camp is just like games and fun, and you can make friends and have a great time. And so we're like during that color fight, like we're just sitting there in the sun talking, and I'm like, okay, like just tell me what are your hesitations? What are you going through? Like what's happening? And she's just telling me, she's like, I don't believe in him and like all this stuff. And she used to. And so we're just praying, and it was like one of the last services of the whole week. And she just came to me, and she's just like, I'm ready. Like, I need to pray right now. And I was just like, I just knew there was just a lot of heaviness in her life. And so I grabbed the youth pastor at the time, because I was like, I'm not qualified to like do this right now. She needs some extra help. And she did. And so I pull him, and we pray over her, and we just laid our hands on her, and she just fell to the floor. Wow. She fell to the floor, and we were just praying over her. And it was a beautiful moment of ministry. And after that, like, it was like, that weight was lifted off. Like she was just like looked like she was like 10 years younger. Wow. Like she looked like a little girl. Wow. And she had the joy of the Lord. And amazing. Like we've just seen, like, she's still in our youth group, and we've seen just like her step into like leadership and different things, and just it's been incredible to see what never happened on a Wednesday night or Sunday morning in that week, and then to see the discipleship from that point.
I love that. Yeah. I love it. And I think that, and parents, grandparents, just getting your kids, your grandkids to camp for the opportunity for God to do something. Our girls have just last summer, like Avery at her recent podcast episode, shout out to the Let's Talk About It podcast with Shalom and Avery. But she was talking about the camp of 2023, how it changed her life. Yeah. And I have seen, just as a parent, like the change in her life. And Valerie, there's more of a spiritual hunger and appetite. And I think for parents, it's that there is a cost. I mean, it's a cost to send our kids. It's a separation that they're gone. Although in middle school, high school, sometimes they're like, get them out of here. Like
please, take them.
Jackie, Preston, you have them for a week. Like, good luck. And but I think it still is that hurdle of separating, but also it's so good for these kids. And I think I've been to like 40 something camps, like as a kid and as a leader.
It's impressive.
And those days I know those days are over. Like my back can't afford that anymore. But just the stories like you were sharing, like I was even thinking as you're talking about, like, there's like so many things that God has done on the mountain that has just been like, I was honored to like be able to witness God do some amazing things. And so parents, there's information for kids camp, for youth camp. You have got to get your kids to camp, get your teenagers to camp. Because it really can shape the future of their life. And so thank you guys. Any last words you want to share with parents? Help them out with their teenagers?
We just want to let you know we're here for you guys. Yeah, you can always come up to our room and talk to us. We're not disconnected from you guys. I feel like I can speak for the both of us that our goal is to partner with you guys.
Yeah, that's good.
We're not trying to pit us and the kids versus you guys. Right. Because let's be honest, we have your kids for maybe an hour, 2 hours a week. Right. You have them all week. Yeah. And really, like, you guys are who God entrusted with. Yeah. And so come to us if you need anything. We want to partner with you and help you guys. Good.
And speaking from the older generation of, like, a lot of our parents of teenagers are like late 30s, 40s, maybe early 50s. And so we need some 20-somethings to help us with, like, what's a spam account? Like, what does that mean? And so parents, if you have any questions, these guys are available. Any last words? He said it all.
I know. He takes the opportunity. Yeah. I think I was just thinking about, like, parents, like, sometimes spend a lot of money on sports or like the focus will be like, doing all these things to build up their resume to get them into college, but like the significance of an eternal impact is so much more important. Yeah. And sometimes, like, they are secretive and they're closed off. And if your kid has a spam account, like, they're hiding things from you, like, as a parent. That's who they're hiding it from. Right. And so I would just try to break those walls down and, send them because they need it and they need Jesus more than they need to get into a good school or whatever the case is.
Oh, man.
You mentioned youth sports. I have strong thoughts on youth sports, and that's going to have to be another podcast episode. Our parents with youth sports, who that's their focus, they got spared today from some strong thoughts. But Jesus says, I think we shared this in the last episode too with kids of, if we will gain the whole world but lose our own soul, like, what's the point? Man. And I feel like parents are like, if my kid gets all league or they get this scholarship, but then they lose their soul, like, what was the point? And so this is such an important, sports investments, like, are short term, but the spiritual investment of camps are long term, eternal. And I don't even know if we'll know all the deep rooted seeds that God planted in hearts for camp. Man. So I want to thank you guys. You are just I'm praying for 20, 30 more camps for both of you. That's going to be awesome. So anyway, we're so grateful. Thank you, parents, grandparents, coaches, teachers, all those who help raise the next generation. We are praying for you, and these guys are here for you. Absolutely. Thank you for watching. And make sure, if you know of a parent, that send this their way, as we've had a pretty good conversation on a variety of topics dealing with teenagers. And so make sure you like this, subscribe it, share with a friend. And thank you for joining us. This is the final episode of our season 2 of the Highlands podcast. And so it's been such a great ride over these first 16 episodes. And so we can't wait to bring another season in the fall. We'll see you next time. Take care, and make sure that if you have a teenager around you, that you're pointing them to Jesus. That's so, so important. Have a great, great week. God bless.